Hello there, and welcome to Forgotten Worlds. My name is Thomas, and tonight I'll be your guide through a question that drifts quietly at the edges of science and imagination. The Earth is old, older than we can truly grasp. For 4.5 billion years, it has turned and shifted, eroded and renewed. Oceans have risen and fallen, continents have collided and torn apart, mountains have been lifted into the sky and worn down into sand. Against that vastness, the story of humanity is impossibly brief, only a few thousand years, a blink in the long night of geological time. And yet, we often assume that we are the first to build cities, to carve monuments from stone, to bend nature to our designs, to dream of permanence and leave a mark that endures. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if civilizations have risen before us? Civilizations erased not only by time, but by the Earth itself. What if others walked this planet long before we did, reaching heights we cannot imagine, only to vanish, leaving behind nothing more than whispers in stone, echoes in myth, or faint scars in the soil? This is not a debate, but an exploration. A quiet wandering through the silence of deep time, and the possibility that humanity is not the beginning of civilization on Earth, but only the latest chapter in a story that may have played out again and again. So wherever you are tonight, take a breath. Let the day soften around you. Let your thoughts slow to the pace of stone, and imagine not only the world we know, but the forgotten worlds that may have come before, hidden, erased, waiting to be remembered. And before we can search for traces of those lost civilizations, we must first understand the scale of the stage on which they might have lived. Not centuries, not even millennia, but billions of years, the spans of time that shape mountains, erase oceans, and rewrite the surface of the Earth. To even ask this question, we must step into deep time itself. To begin, we must step into the vastness of time itself, not the scale of centuries or even millennia, the spans we so often call long ago. No, to consider whether we are the first civilization on Earth, we must stretch our imagination further into billions of years. Earth is 4.5 billion years old, a number so immense that it resists comprehension. We measure our own lives in decades, our histories in centuries, our civilizations in millennia, but the Earth's story is written in eons. Entire mountain ranges rise and crumble in chapters of that story. Oceans expand, vanish, and return again. Life itself has appeared, flourished, and nearly vanished many times over. If we compressed Earth's history into a single calendar year, with the planet forming on January 1st and today being December 31st, human civilization would occupy only the last few seconds before midnight. The pyramids of Egypt, the Parthenon of Greece, the Great Wall of China, all would appear in a blink. Even the rise of Homo sapiens, stretching back some 300,000 years, would barely register. We are latecomers in a story so vast that almost everything we know lies in the final page. And yet, the pages before us are not empty. They are filled with forgotten worlds, continents in different shapes and configurations, climates swinging from icehouse to hothouse, creatures both alien and familiar, walking the land and swimming the seas. Dinosaurs ruled for over 165 million years, an empire of life far longer than our own species has even existed. Before them, vast forests of towering ferns and insects the size of birds filled the carboniferous swamps. And before them, still stranger forms lived and died, leaving behind only faint impressions in stone. In this immensity, what room is there for civilization? The answer, unsettling as it may be, is plenty. Enough time, in fact, for civilizations to rise and vanish not once, but many times. But why, then, do we not see their remains? Why do we not find their cities, their tools, their monuments? The answer lies in the Earth itself. The planet is not a static museum. It is a restless machine. The crust of the earth is broken into plates, shifting and grinding, building mountains and tearing them down, consuming ocean floors and raising new ones. Over millions of years, the surface of the earth is recycled. Rocks that once lay under ancient cities or ancient forests or ancient seas are drawn downward, melted, and remade. Erosion strips mountains into rivers, rivers carry silt to oceans, and oceans bury it beneath new layers of stone. This means that traces of the distant past are rare. Fossils themselves are extraordinary accidents, requiring perfect conditions to preserve the bones, shells, or imprints of living things. Even then, the fossil record is fragmentary. Whole species, whole lineages, may have risen and vanished without leaving a single preserved trace. If this is true for living creatures, how much more so for civilizations? Our cities are fragile in the scale of deep time. Concrete crumbles in centuries. Steel rusts in decades. Glass breaks, wood rots, even plastic, though long-lived, will eventually be ground down into invisible particles. Given a few million years, almost all physical evidence of our existence would vanish. Skyscrapers would become dust. Highways would erode into faint ridges. Only in certain geological contexts, fossilized chemical residues, unusual concentrations of isotopes, plastics trapped in sedimentary layers would faint signatures of our civilization remain. So when we ask why we have not found evidence of earlier civilizations, perhaps the better question is, why would we expect to? If another species had risen millions of years ago, building its own cities, shaping its own monuments, how much would survive today? How much of our world, if erased, would endure long enough to be discovered by beings millions of years hence? The unsettling possibility is this: there has been enough time for countless civilizations to rise and fall, enough time for worlds of intelligence, culture, and ambition to flourish, collapse, and be erased so completely that only the faintest whispers remain. And perhaps, in fragments of myth, in unexplained anomalies of geology, or in patterns we cannot yet decipher, those whispers still speak. But to hear them, we must first accept the immensity of deep time, the scale of Earth's history, the silence of its recycling, the humbling possibility that we are not the first, but only the latest to dream of permanence in a world that forgets. If the Earth has had time enough for countless civilizations to rise and vanish, then the next question follows naturally. How would we know? If an industrial species capable of shaping cities, burning fuel, altering its climate had walked the Earth millions of years ago, what signs would it leave behind for us to find? This is not the speculation of fringe thinkers alone. In 2018, two NASA scientists, Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank, posed this very question in a paper they titled The Silurian Hypothesis. The name was chosen playfully, after a race of intelligent reptilians from British science fiction, but the thought experiment was serious. If humans were to disappear tomorrow, and if Earth's restless geology continued its cycles for millions of years, would any evidence of our civilization remain detectable? Their conclusion was sobering. Almost nothing would survive. Consider what happens when we abandon a city. Within decades, vegetation reclaims it. Within centuries, steel and concrete begin to crumble. In 10,000 years, our skyscrapers, highways, and monuments would be little more than eroded rubble, buried beneath soil and sand. A million years later, tectonic movement and erosion would erase even those traces. By 10 million years, almost nothing recognizable would remain. And yet, Schmidt and Frank argued, there are signals that might persist, not the obvious ones, like buildings or machines, but the subtle ones, etched into the very chemistry of the Earth. One such signal is in the carbon cycle. Our burning of fossil fuels releases vast amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This alters not only the climate but also the isotopic balance of carbon itself. Future geologists, millions of years from now, might notice a sudden spike in the ratio of light carbon isotopes, a fingerprint of massive fossil fuel burning. If a civilization long before us also tapped into ancient carbon reserves, their actions might have left a similar anomaly buried in stone. Another signal lies in synthetic materials. Plastics, though fragile on the surface, can endure when buried in sediment. Compressed into new forms, they may fossilize as strange, unnatural compounds. Similarly, the byproducts of nuclear technology, long-lived radioactive isotopes, could persist for millions of years in geological strata. To a future geologist, they would appear as faint but unmistakable scars of a technological age. Even changes in biodiversity might reveal a civilization. Humanity has altered the distribution of species across the globe through domestication, agriculture, and mass extinction. If another species had done the same millions of years ago, its impact might echo faintly in the fossil record. A sudden narrowing of diversity, the spread of certain plants or animals beyond their natural ranges, a strange pattern of decline followed by recovery. The Silurian hypothesis reminds us that we are searching in the wrong way. We expect to find ruins, artifacts, or monuments. But deep time erases those. What remains are not the things themselves, but the changes they made to the planet, the chemistry, the climate, the scars hidden in stone. And yet, this raises a troubling possibility. What if we have already seen such anomalies, but failed to recognize them? There are, after all, unexplained events in Earth's history, sudden spikes in carbon dioxide, mysterious warming events, abrupt die-offs and recoveries that we attribute to natural causes. Could some of them, in the faintest possibility, be echoes of an earlier civilization? Could we be looking directly at the evidence, yet blind to its meaning because we assume we are the first? Mainstream science remains cautious. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and no anomaly so far has demanded the conclusion of a pre-human civilization. But the Silurian hypothesis does not claim such civilizations existed. It only reminds us how little of them would survive if they did. It reminds us that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, not when the Earth itself is so efficient at erasing its past. This thought experiment humbles us. It reminds us that we, too, may leave only whispers behind. That millions of years from now, if another species studies the rocks, they will not find our cities or our monuments. They will find chemical scars, isotopic shifts, thin layers of plastic pressed into stone. That will be our legacy, not the beauty of our art, nor the scale of our buildings, but faint signals of a species that once burned ancient fuels, reshaped its world, and vanished. And if that is true for us, why not for others? Why not for civilizations that may have walked this earth long before us, erased so completely that only the subtlest of traces remain? To imagine civilizations before our own, we must first look at the great punctuation marks in Earth's story, the mass extinctions. These were not gradual declines, but sudden, catastrophic resets, moments when the flourishing of life was cut short, and the planet itself seemed to wipe the slate clean. Scientists recognize 5 great extinctions, each reshaping the trajectory of evolution. They are like scars in the fossil record, dividing one age of life from another. The first came in the Ordovician, some 443 million years ago. Life then was largely confined to the sea's trilobites, brachiopods, the first primitive fish. In a geological instant, nearly 85% of marine species vanished, perhaps as a result of sudden glaciation and shifting sea levels. The oceans emptied, and when they filled again, the creatures that emerged were different, adapted to a changed world. The second, the late Devonian extinction, unfolded around 372 million years ago. Vast reefs collapsed, fish species dwindled, and nearly 3/4 of marine life disappeared. It was not one single event, but a drawn-out crisis, perhaps triggered by climate change, perhaps by the spread of plants that altered carbon cycles and oxygen levels. Again, the planet pressed a reset button. Life staggered, then found a new path forward. Then came the most devastating of all, the Permian-Triassic extinction 252 million years ago. Known as the Great Dying, it erased 90% of species in the oceans and 70% on land. Whole ecosystems were obliterated. The causes remain debated. Massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia, runaway greenhouse gases, ocean anoxia, perhaps even impacts from space. Whatever the trigger, the result was near total collapse. For a time, the Earth was almost barren, and yet, from this emptiness, life recovered, setting the stage for the rise of the dinosaurs. The fourth extinction struck at the end of the Triassic, 201 million years ago. It cleared the way for the dinosaurs to dominate. Entire groups of reptiles vanished, along with much of marine life, perhaps due to massive volcanic activity associated with the breakup of Pangaea. Out of destruction came opportunity, and for the next 165 million years, dinosaurs ruled the land. The fifth, perhaps the most famous, was the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction 66 million years ago. A massive asteroid struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, triggering firestorms, tsunamis, and a global winter. 3/4 of species perished, including the non-avian dinosaurs, and in the absence of dinosaurs, mammals began their ascent, eventually leading to us. 5 great extinctions, 5 resets, 5 moments when the trajectory of life was radically altered. When we consider these events, a possibility arises. What if intelligence had emerged before? What if, in one of those long ages prior to us, evolution had already produced beings capable of shaping tools, building societies, even creating civilizations? The fossil record is sparse, the traces of deep time fragile. If such a civilization existed, and if it was caught in one of these extinction events, how much would remain? Would we find their cities, or only a gap, a sudden disappearance of species, a silence we attribute to natural causes? The extinctions remind us that life is not a steady climb, but a series of rises and collapses. Intelligence, if it emerged once, could emerge again. Civilizations, if they rose once, could rise many times. Each extinction is not only an end, but an opening, a chance for new forms to flourish. Perhaps among those forms, in forgotten ages, intelligence reached heights now erased. We may never know for certain. The record is incomplete, shattered by time. But in contemplating the great extinctions, we are reminded that our place on Earth is fragile, provisional. Civilization is not guaranteed, it is contingent. It exists only because other worlds, other ages were swept away. And if it happened to them, it could happen to us. Of all Earth's extinction events, none looms larger than the one that ended the Permian period 252 million years ago. Known simply as the Great Dying, it was the most catastrophic biological crisis the planet has ever endured. In its wake, 90% of all marine species were gone. On land, forests collapsed, whole groups of animals disappeared, and 70% of terrestrial species perished. Life itself teetered on the edge of annihilation. The scale of devastation defies imagination. Picture an ocean in which nearly every fish, every shell, every reef is dead. Picture landscapes stripped of forests, the air thick with volcanic gases, rivers running acidic, skies dimmed by ash. In that silence, Earth nearly lost the experiment of complex life altogether. And yet, against all odds, life clawed its way back, reshaping itself into new forms and eventually setting the stage for the age of reptiles and dinosaurs. Scientists debate the causes. The leading theory points to massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia, the so-called Siberian traps, where lava flowed across millions of square kilometers. These eruptions released vast amounts of carbon dioxide and methane, triggering runaway global warming. Oceans lost their oxygen. Acid rain poisoned ecosystems. Temperatures soared, perhaps by as much as 10 degrees Celsius. Other theories suggest asteroid impacts or combinations of catastrophic factors. Whatever the cause, the result was nearly total erasure. And here is where the speculative question takes root. If an intelligent civilization had existed before the Permian extinction, whether reptilian, amphibian, or of some lineage long vanished, would we ever know? The answer may be no. The Great Dying was not only a biological catastrophe, but a geological one. Land was buried beneath lava, oceans turned over, seafloors churned, sediments recycled. Any traces of tools, cities, or monuments would have been erased, melted, or pulverized. Even if an advanced civilization had reached a peak building structures, shaping metals, leaving behind art, its remains would have been obliterated by the scale of destruction. We must also consider the incompleteness of the fossil record. Even under stable conditions, fossils are rare. Entire species can live and die without leaving a single preserved skeleton. How much more so for something like a civilization, which would leave behind artifacts far more fragile than bones? A skyscraper, in deep time, is far less likely to endure than a seashell. This invites speculation of a haunting kind. If an intelligent species had risen before us, creatures capable of culture, of technology, of shaping their world, they may have been completely erased by the Permian extinction. Their cities, their knowledge, their memory lost in fire and flood, leaving behind only silence. And yet, memory has a way of persisting, not in fossils or stone, but in myth. Human cultures across the world tell stories of worlds destroyed, of floods, of fires, of divine retribution and rebirth. These myths are not literal history, but they may be echoes, distorted fragments of truths carried through cycles of remembering and forgetting. Could survivors of earlier ages, reduced to small, scattered groups, have carried forward memories of their lost world? Could those memories, retold and reshaped across unimaginable spans of time, be the seed of myths we still tell today? It is, of course, speculation, but it is speculation that touches something deep within us. The idea that we are not alone in history, that others have risen and fallen before us, changes how we see ourselves. It humbles us. It suggests that civilization is not unique, but cyclical, a pattern written into Earth itself. The Permian-Triassic mystery, then, is not only about extinction, it is about possibility. It reminds us that worlds can vanish utterly, leaving almost no trace, that life can be reduced to silence and yet begin again, that civilizations, if they existed before us, may have been erased so completely that only the faintest whispers remain, whispers that reach us not through stone, but through imagination, through story, through the haunting sense that what has been may one day be again. After the Permian-Triassic extinction, life did not merely recover, it reinvented itself. Out of the silence rose new forms, creatures that would dominate the Earth for the next 165 million years, the dinosaurs. Their reign is difficult to fathom. Humanity measures its civilizations in millennia, its species in mere hundreds of thousands of years. Dinosaurs, by contrast, thrived for an expanse of time so vast that it dwarfs all of human history. For over 160 million years, they adapted, diversified, and endured across shifting continents and climates. From the massive, long-necked sauropods that roamed in herds, to predators like Allosaurus and Tyrannosaurus, to the earliest birds that took to the skies, dinosaurs reigned supreme. And yet, in all that time, we often assume they never reached intelligence. We see them as powerful but simple creatures, shaped by instinct rather than thought. But is this assumption justified? In the 1980s, paleontologist Dale Russell proposed a thought experiment that still lingers in scientific imagination: the dinosauroid. He noted that one dinosaur in particular, Troodon, possessed unusually large eyes, grasping hands, and an encephalization quotient, the ratio of brain to body size that was among the highest of its time. If evolution had continued uninterrupted, Russell speculated, Troodon might have developed into a form of intelligent, tool-using being. His model envisioned a creature with a large brain, upright posture, and dexterous hands, a dinosaur that looked uncannily humanoid. While many scientists dismissed this vision as overly anthropocentric, projecting human traits onto an alien lineage, the question it raised remains powerful. Could intelligence have evolved among the dinosaurs? And if it did, what would remain of it today? The unsettling truth is that if such intelligence had emerged, even if it had built tools, shelters, or even cities, the evidence might be gone. Stone structures, if they existed, would erode in millions of years. Metal would corrode, wood and textiles would decay. Fossilization is rare, and the chance of finding a preserved tool or artifact from tens of millions of years ago is vanishingly small. If an intelligent species rose among the dinosaurs and fell before the asteroid impact at the end of the Cretaceous, we might never know. This speculation grows sharper when we remember that intelligence has arisen independently multiple times in Earth's history. Birds, descendants of dinosaurs, demonstrate remarkable problem-solving skills. Crows use tools, parrots understand complex concepts, and pigeons can recognize human faces. If their ancestors, the dinosaurs, had millions of years to evolve, is it truly unthinkable that similar or even greater intelligence could have appeared? And consider this: mammals have existed for over 200 million years, yet only in the last blink of time have they produced civilization. For most of their history, they were small, nocturnal creatures, hiding in the shadows of dinosaurs. If intelligence can emerge so late in our lineage, could it not also have emerged and perhaps disappeared in another? If such a civilization ever existed, its traces may be gone, swept away by extinction and deep time. Yet the possibility itself reshapes how we see the age of dinosaurs. They were not merely lumbering beasts. They were participants in a vast and intricate story, one in which intelligence was at least possible, perhaps even attempted. And if it was attempted once and failed, perhaps it can be attempted again and again until it succeeds, until it finds its way into permanence or into silence once more. When we speak of intelligence, it is tempting to see it as a straight line leading only to us, as though consciousness and culture were the inevitable destination of evolution. But the truth is subtler, stranger. Intelligence has sprouted like wildflowers in many corners of Earth's garden, appearing independently, flourishing for a time, and then withering or transforming into something new. Humanity may be the only species to have built skyscrapers and satellites, but we are not the only minds this planet has produced. Consider the oceans. Beneath their surface swim beings whose intelligence challenges our assumptions. The cephalopods, octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish. Their lineage diverged from ours more than 500 million years ago, and yet they have developed remarkable cognitive abilities. Octopuses solve puzzles, open jars, and escape from enclosures with Houdini-like skill. They wield tools, arranging coconut shells for shelter. They recognize individuals, remember experiences, and demonstrate playfulness behaviors once thought uniquely human. Unlike us, their intelligence is distributed. Much of an octopus's nervous system is in its arms, allowing each limb a degree of autonomy. To hold such a creature is to hold something alien, a mind that is not centralized but networked, a way of thinking that is neither mammalian nor avian, but something wholly other. If intelligence is possible in cephalopods, might it have been possible on a grander scale? Some speculate that, given time, octopuses or squids might have formed complex societies. Yet here the ocean conspires against permanence. Without fire, metallurgy, or agriculture, the path to industrial civilization may be closed. And even if such a society had emerged, the sea preserves little. Bones dissolve, structures wash away. Fossils of soft-bodied creatures are rare. A civilization of the oceans, if it ever existed, would vanish almost without a trace. Now turn from the seas to the land, to our own kin. For we are not the only branch of humanity that once walked the earth. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbits of Indonesia, Homo naledi in South Africa, and perhaps others still undiscovered. Each had its own way of being human. Neanderthals crafted tools, buried their dead, and painted caves with symbols. Denisovan DNA still flows in our veins, a quiet reminder of ancient encounters. Even the diminutive Homo floresiensis, barely over a meter tall, left behind stone tools suggesting dexterity and planning. Were these not civilizations in embryo? Were they not almost civilizations, paths of intelligence that nearly blossomed into something more? The evidence grows stronger that these other hominins were not our inferior cousins, but our equals in many respects. Neanderthals may have sung, carved ornaments, and shared myths. Denisovans may have traversed harsh landscapes with skill. What if, given just a few more millennia, one of these lineages had risen further, domesticating plants, shaping metals, building cities? And what of those before them, species like Homo erectus, who survived for nearly 2 million years? They mastered fire, crafted stone tools, and spread across continents. Their endurance far exceeds that of our own species so far. Could endurance itself have been a kind of civilization, one not marked by skyscrapers but by adaptation, stability, and longevity? When we weave these threads together, a pattern emerges. Intelligence is not unique. It has been attempted many times. It is not the birthright of Homo sapiens alone, but a recurring possibility, arising wherever conditions allow. Some of these attempts may have ended quietly. Some may have brushed against the threshold of true civilization, only to falter. And some just maybe may have crossed that threshold, building worlds now erased by time. If so, then what we call human history may be only the latest chapter in a longer, hidden saga. A saga of minds rising, reaching, and vanishing. A saga written not only in stone tools and cave paintings, but in silences, in absences, in the haunting possibility that we are surrounded by the ghosts of forgotten civilizations. If intelligence has arisen before, if civilizations have come and gone, then we must ask, what remains of them? Where are their ruins, their artifacts, their marks upon the earth? The troubling answer is that archaeology, powerful though it is, has limits. Limits imposed not only by our own methods, but by the nature of time itself. Archaeology is a science of fragments. Its scope is measured in the survival of stone, bone, and clay. The written record, so central to our understanding of history, reaches back only 5,000 years. Beyond that, we enter the realm of prehistory, where memory depends upon what the earth has chosen to preserve. And the earth does not preserve kindly. Wood rots, cloth decays, iron rusts to nothing, even stone erodes. What survives from ancient times tends to be the hard, the accidental, the buried. This is why we find flint tools from 1 million years ago, but rarely anything more fragile. It is why a clay pot can endure while a woven basket vanishes. And it is why the record of deep time is not a library, but a scattering of whispers across ages. Some discoveries, however, challenge our sense of order. objects that appear too old, too complex, too anomalous to fit neatly within the story we tell. These are known as out-of-place artifacts. A hammer encased in stone, reportedly hundreds of millions of years old, metal spheres found in South African mines, with grooves too precise to be explained easily, patterns in ancient rock that resemble machine marks. Each claim is debated, dismissed by many as misinterpretation or fraud, and yet they persist, tantalizing, as though they are echoes of something we do not yet understand. Could advanced technology, if it once existed, survive in disguise? This is the speculation of some researchers that remnants of ancient industry might not appear as machines or monuments, but as anomalies in the fossil and geological record. A piece of advanced ceramic might, over millions of years, resemble a natural stone. A fragment of alloy might weather into an unrecognizable mineral. Even plastics, compressed under strata, might transform into something indistinguishable from natural polymers. Consider coal seams, layers of compressed plant matter from ancient forests. They often contain strange inclusions, shapes, voids, mineralized fragments. Most are natural, but what if, hidden among them, there were once remnants of human-like industry, now transmuted into fossil form? We would see them as oddities, but not necessarily as artifacts. The past may already hold its secrets in plain sight, but we may lack the context to interpret them. There are, too, the great gaps in the fossil record, whole ages for which evidence is sparse, whole lineages known only from a handful of bones. Paleontologists remind us that for every fossil we uncover, countless others are lost forever. The record is not a complete history, it is a lottery of preservation. And if it is so incomplete for life itself, how much more so for civilization, fragile and fleeting in geological terms. What we call anomalies may one day be reinterpreted. What we call accidents may turn out to be traces. But to reach that point, we must first allow the possibility that advanced technology, if it once existed millions of years ago, may not look like technology at all when it reaches us. It may look like stone, like mineral, like the ordinary fabric of the earth. And this is the paradox. We search for the extraordinary, but the extraordinary may already be hidden in the ordinary. Civilizations may fossilize not as ruins, but as patterns, as chemical shifts, as mineral ghosts in stone. The challenge is to recognize them, to train our eyes not only for what we expect, but for what we cannot yet imagine. Perhaps then, the silence of deep time is not empty. Perhaps it is full, crowded with traces we do not yet know how to read. Perhaps the signs are already here, hidden in stone and fossil, waiting for us to see. If we struggle to imagine what a pre-human civilization might leave behind, it may help to ask another question. What will remain of us? What traces of our own world will endure if humanity were to vanish tomorrow, leaving the earth once again to its long cycles of erosion and renewal? The unsettling truth is that very little would survive. Our cities, vast and gleaming as they seem, are fragile when measured against deep time. Steel corrodes in decades, concrete fractures and weathers away in centuries, glass crumbles, wood rots. Even monuments we imagine as eternal, our towers, our dams, our bridges, would not last beyond a few tens of thousands of years at most. Left untended, our civilizations would be reclaimed by forests, seas, and deserts with startling speed. 100,000 years from now, little would remain visible on the surface. Skyscrapers would be gone, roads reduced to faint ridges. What remained would be buried, scattered, eroded beyond recognition. But the earth itself would remember us, in subtle ways. Plastics, for example. Our oceans and soils are saturated with them, tiny fragments, invisible to the eye, woven into sediments across the globe. Compressed beneath layers of earth, these plastics could fossilize into strange, unnatural rocks. Millions of years from now, a future geologist might find a vein of polymer stone running through ancient strata, a clear marker that something unusual once happened here. Another signature lies in isotopes. Our nuclear activities have seeded the Earth with radioactive elements, some long-lived, with half-lives stretching into millions of years. These isotopes will persist, lodged in geological layers, whispering to the future that a species once split the atom and wielded its power. We will also leave scars in the atmosphere, frozen into ice cores and sediments. Our burning of fossil fuels has altered the ratio of carbon isotopes, creating a chemical anomaly that will endure in stone long after our cities are dust. Our fertilizers and industrial processes have reshaped nitrogen cycles. Our mining has moved metals from deep within the crust to the surface, scattering them in ways unlikely to occur naturally. These are not monuments in the traditional sense. They are not pyramids or temples. They are scars, chemical fingerprints, isotopic shifts, fossilized plastics, faint but detectable. And this is the point. If another civilization had risen millions of years ago, its traces too would likely be scars, not monuments. We should not expect intact structures, but whispers written into the chemistry of the earth. And so the archaeology of absence begins not with what is present, but with what is missing, with the realization that absence itself is a kind of evidence. That what is erased may tell us as much as what survives. The faintest signals a layer of unusual minerals, a sudden isotopic spike, a concentration of compounds that do not belong may be the only signs we ever find of civilizations before us. It is a humbling thought. We often imagine permanence, yet the truth is that even our greatest works are temporary. What endures is not our monuments, but our impact, not our cities, but the traces they leave when they are gone. And if we are destined to vanish, our echoes will be faint, indeed detectable, only to those who know how to listen for them in stone, in soil, in fossil. Which brings us back to the central question: if others walked this earth before us, what did they leave behind? Were their traces chemical, like ours will be? Were their scars erased by tectonics, buried by ocean floors, recycled into magma? Or are they still here, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to recognize them for what they are? The archaeology of absence reminds us of the scale of forgetting. It reminds us that civilizations, however advanced, may vanish almost entirely, leaving only faint whispers in the fabric of the planet. And it reminds us that we, too, are fragile in the face of deep time, part of a cycle larger than any monument, larger than any species, larger even than memory itself. If the earth forgets, then perhaps it is myth that remembers. For even as archaeology offers only fragments, stories endure told around fires, passed through generations, reshaped by culture but retaining some echo of what once was. Among these stories, none has captured the imagination so powerfully as the tale of Atlantis. The first written mention of Atlantis comes not from explorers or priests, but from Plato, the philosopher of Athens. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written nearly 400 years ago, he describes a great island civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis, he wrote, was wealthy, advanced, and powerful. But its pride and corruption led to its downfall, and in a single day and night of catastrophe, it sank beneath the sea. Most scholars read Plato's story as allegory, a moral tale about hubris and the fate of societies that forget virtue. Yet the power of the myth lies in its ambiguity. For if it is allegory, why does it feel like memory? Why does it resonate so deeply across cultures, as though it is not a fable but a remembrance? Across the world, we find stories of floods, of drowned lands, of golden ages, lost. The Sumerians spoke of a great deluge, as did the Babylonians in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Hebrew Bible tells of Noah, In India, the ancient texts speak of Manu, who was warned of a flood and built a vessel. In the Americas, indigenous traditions from the Hopi to the Maya tell of worlds destroyed by rising waters. Even in remote islands of the Pacific, myths recall lands swallowed by the ocean. Could these be cultural fossils? Fragments of memory passed down through countless generations, remembering not only floods but the end of civilizations. It is tempting to connect them to the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, when sea levels rose dramatically as glaciers melted. Vast coastlines were drowned, fertile plains lost, entire habitats erased. For the people who lived then, the transformation of the world would have seemed apocalyptic. What if Atlantis is not one place, but many? Not a single lost city, but a memory of drowned lands across the world. Doggerland in the North Sea, once home to human communities, now submerged. Sundaland in Southeast Asia, a vast continental shelf turned archipelago by rising seas. Beringia, the land bridge that once connected Asia and North America, now beneath icy waters. Each was a world erased, remembered only in fragments of story. In this light, Plato's Atlantis becomes not allegory alone, but symbol, a condensation of memory into myth. A story that speaks to something universal, that civilizations rise, that they flourish, and that they can fall, swallowed by time, by water, by catastrophe. Myth may not tell us when or where, but it tells us that forgetting is not total, that in the human mind, echoes endure, that what is lost in stone may survive in story. And so the flood myths invite us to wonder, are they only metaphors for the fragility of life, or are they windows into forgotten histories? Are they poetry or memory, allegory or archive? Perhaps they are both. Perhaps myth is the only record some civilizations ever leave, written not in books but in dreams, carried forward across ages by the spoken word. If that is true, then Atlantis is not a single place on a map. It is a mirror held up to us, reminding us that the rise and fall of civilizations is not only possible but inevitable, that the sea can swallow worlds. That memory itself is fragile, but never wholly lost. And if Atlantis is memory, then the question becomes, memory of what? Of a real city, of a real people, of a civilization erased by deep time, or of something even older, an echo from an age we have forgotten, passed down across cycles of humanity, transformed into story but carrying within it the shadow of truth. Atlantis may be the most famous story of a vanished civilization, but it is far from the only one. Across the world, in cultures separated by oceans and millennia, we find echoes of other lost lands, myths of continents that disappeared, golden ages that ended, and worlds erased by catastrophe. Each tale stands on its own, yet together they weave a pattern too striking to ignore, as though humanity itself carries an ancient memory of civilizations forgotten. Take, for instance, the legend of Lemuria. In the 19th century, scientists noticed similarities between fossils and species found in India and Madagascar, but absent in Africa or the Middle East. Some hypothesized a sunken land bridge, a lost continent in the Indian Ocean where these creatures once lived. Though later science explained these connections through plate tectonics, the idea of Lemuria endured in the human imagination. It was said to be the home of a great civilization, a people who vanished beneath the waves, leaving only fragments of their wisdom scattered among surviving cultures. A similar tale emerged in the Pacific. Mu. In the late 19th century, the explorer Augustus Le Plongeon claimed to have translated Mayan texts describing a great continent that once lay in the Atlantic or Pacific, home to an advanced people destroyed by fire and flood. Though his translations were flawed, the myth of Mu took root, inspiring generations of speculation. In this story, Mu was not just a land, but the cradle of humanity, the mother of civilizations now dispersed across the world. Further north lies the legend of Hyperborea, told by the ancient Greeks. It was said to be a land beyond the north wind, a paradise where the sun never set, inhabited by a people of extraordinary longevity and wisdom. Though most likely allegorical, the tale resonates with the idea of a golden age, a world older than our own, remembered in whispers. And of course, nearly every culture speaks of a golden age, a time before decline, when humans lived in harmony with the gods or with nature. Hesiod wrote of the golden race, when people lived long lives without sorrow. Hindu traditions describe Satya Yuga, the first of 4 ages, when truth and virtue reigned. Indigenous traditions of the Americas speak of worlds before this one, destroyed and remade in cycles. The Maya envisioned successive ages of creation, each ended by catastrophe. Why do these myths converge? Why do cultures separated by vast oceans tell stories that rhyme with one another, of drowned lands, vanished peoples, and cycles of rise and fall? Skeptics remind us that such myths may emerge naturally, born of human imagination and observation. Floods are universal experiences, golden ages a universal longing. Perhaps the similarities reflect shared psychology rather than shared memory. And yet, the possibility remains. What if these are distorted recollections of real events? What if beneath the allegory lies memory blurred, refracted, but still carrying a truth older than history? Consider the end of the Ice Age. Sea levels rose by more than 100 meters, drowning vast coastlines. For the people who lived there, it was not myth, but reality. Worlds were swallowed, lands vanished, communities scattered. Their descendants, telling stories by firelight, may have remembered not precisely, not historically, but mythically. And as generations passed, memory became legend, legend became myth, and myth became a shared human inheritance. Perhaps Lemuria, Mu, Hyperborea, and Atlantis are not separate tales, but facets of a single truth. Perhaps they are humanity's attempt to remember what the earth itself has erased, that civilizations, or at least the seeds of them, may have risen before, only to be lost to flood, fire, and time. In this way, myth becomes not just story but archive, not a literal record, but a symbolic one, a record of forgetting and remembering, a record that whispers of lost worlds we cannot yet prove, but cannot quite dismiss. And so the legends endure. They endure because they speak to something deeper than history, the haunting possibility that we are not the first, that others have walked this path before us, dreamed these dreams, and vanished into silence, leaving behind only echoes in myth. If myths remind us of forgotten worlds, history reminds us of fragile ones. For even within the brief span of recorded time, civilizations have not marched in a straight line toward progress, but have risen, faltered, and fallen. Their ruins stand as reminders that greatness is temporary, that memory is fragile, and that the story of humanity is not one of steady ascent, but of cycles. Consider Rome, once the center of a vast empire stretching across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. At its height, it commanded legions, built aqueducts, raised monuments, and spread law and culture across continents. To its citizens, it must have felt eternal. And yet, Rome fell. The aqueducts dried, the monuments crumbled, the knowledge of its engineers and scholars was scattered. For centuries, much of its science, its philosophy, and its infrastructure lay forgotten until rediscovered and reinterpreted in later ages. Or consider the Maya of Central America. They built cities in the jungle, with towering temples aligned to the heavens, carved glyphs, and developed sophisticated mathematics and astronomy. And yet, their great urban centers were eventually abandoned. Climate change, drought, internal strife. Whatever the causes, the cycle ended, and much of their knowledge was swallowed by the forest. It was not until centuries later that their descendants' culture, language, and traditions reasserted themselves in new forms. History is filled with such examples. The Indus Valley civilization, with its planned cities and advanced sanitation, vanished mysteriously, leaving undeciphered scripts as whispers of its memory. The Minoans of Crete flourished with art, trade, and palaces, only to be undone by earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or invaders. Even great centers of knowledge, such as Alexandria, with its legendary library, remind us how fragile memory can be, how quickly the wisdom of an age can burn, scattering into ash. These are not anomalies, they are patterns. Civilizations rise on the currents of prosperity, ingenuity, and order. But when those currents shift through disaster, conflict, or simple exhaustion, they fall. And when they fall, knowledge is not always preserved. Sometimes it vanishes, forcing humanity to relearn what it once knew. What if this cycle, so clear in recorded history, extends further back into prehistory, into deep time? If Rome could rise and fall in a matter of centuries, if the Maya could flourish and vanish within millennia, what might have happened in the span of millions of years? Could civilizations have risen and fallen countless times, each cycle erased so thoroughly that only myth and silence remain? The lesson of history is sobering. Progress is not guaranteed. Continuity is not assured. Civilizations collapse. Libraries burn. Knowledge is lost. The rise and fall of empires is not an exception but a rhythm, repeating itself across cultures and ages. Perhaps this rhythm is not confined to us alone. Perhaps it is the rhythm of Earth itself. A rhythm that has played out before in civilizations we no longer remember. A rhythm that may yet play out again long after us. If civilizations rise and fall in rhythm, then sometimes the fall is not gradual but sudden. Sometimes it comes not from slow decline, but from catastrophe moments, when the earth itself turns violent, when survival hangs by a thread, and when whatever existed before is swept away in an instant. The most famous example lies 66 million years ago. At the end of the Cretaceous period, an asteroid, perhaps 10 kilometers wide, struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact was cataclysmic energy released on a scale greater than billions of atomic bombs. Firestorms raged across continents. Tsunamis taller than skyscrapers swept coastlines. Dust and ash darkened the skies, plunging the earth into a long winter. Photosynthesis collapsed. Food chains crumbled. Within a short span of time, the dinosaurs were gone, along with 3/4 of all species on Earth. We know this event as the Chicxulub impact, but what strikes us is not only its violence, but its finality. In a single moment, an age that had endured for over 165 million years came to an end. If any civilization had existed, then whether among dinosaurs, mammals, or beings, we cannot imagine its traces would have been incinerated, drowned, or buried beneath layers of impact debris. It would have been forgotten in the space of days. But asteroids are not the only agents of reset. The Earth has its own catastrophes, born from within. Consider the Toba supervolcano, which erupted in Indonesia around 74,000 years ago. It was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in the last 2 million years, releasing vast clouds of ash into the atmosphere. Some scientists suggest it triggered a volcanic winter that lasted years, reducing global temperatures and causing population bottlenecks among early humans. If so, our species came perilously close to extinction. A handful of scattered groups survived, and from them all modern humanity descends. Other supervolcanoes remain beneath our feet, slumbering. Yellowstone in North America, Campi Flegrei in Italy, Taupo in New Zealand. If one of these erupted at full scale, it could darken skies for years, collapse agriculture, and unravel civilization as we know it. For earlier species, such an event might have meant total erasure, leaving not even myth, only silence. Even smaller catastrophes leave marks. The Tunguska event in 1908, a cosmic fragment exploding over Siberia, flattened forests across thousands of square kilometers. Had it struck a city, it would have erased it entirely, leaving behind nothing but scorched earth. Multiply such events across millions of years, and we begin to see how fragile memory is. Speculatively, entire advanced species may have risen and been undone by such disasters. Perhaps a civilization flourished tens of millions of years ago, only to be obliterated by impact or eruption, leaving behind no more trace than we might expect from our own world if we were to vanish tomorrow. Perhaps survivors remained, scattered and diminished, carrying fragments of memory that would, over eons, transform into myth. This is the harsh lesson of catastrophe. It does not discriminate. It does not matter how advanced a civilization becomes, how high it builds its towers, how deep it digs its foundations. When fire falls from the sky or the earth itself cracks open, all can be undone in an instant. And yet, catastrophe is not only an end, but a beginning. After Chicxulub, mammals flourished. After Toba, humanity endured. After each reset, life finds a way forward, reshaping itself into new forms. Perhaps civilization, too, follows this pattern. Perhaps it is not unique to us, but part of a cycle of rise, collapse, and renewal, punctuated by catastrophes we cannot predict. In this view, we are not the first civilization to face the risk of erasure. We are only the most recent, walking a path others may have walked before, each in their time, each forgotten by the vast silence of Earth. The Earth is not a static archive. It is not a museum, preserving its past in neat and orderly halls. It is a restless, living machine, always shifting, eroding, renewing itself. In this endless churning, the surface becomes a palimpsest, a manuscript written over and over until only fragments of the original script remain. If civilizations have risen before us, Earth itself has conspired to erase them. Erosion is the first hand of forgetting. Wind scours stone, water carves valleys, glaciers grind mountains into dust. The monuments we imagine as eternal temples, pyramids, cities are, in geological terms, fragile. Left untended, they vanish in millennia, their stones reduced to rubble, their foundations swallowed by earth and sea. Given millions of years, nothing remains. Tectonics is the deeper force. The continents themselves drift, colliding and tearing apart. Mountains rise, seas close, rifts open. The crust is not permanent but recycled. Slabs of seafloor are drawn down into the mantle, melted, and returned as new rock. Less than 1% of Earth's surface is older than 3 billion years, and even that ancient rock is scarred and incomplete. If civilizations existed tens or hundreds of millions of years ago, their cities may now lie deep within the mantle, transformed into magma, unrecognizable even to the most careful geologist. Volcanoes, too, play their part. They bury landscapes beneath flows of lava, entombing everything in their path. Ash clouds obscure the sun, rainfall becomes acidic, ecosystems collapse. And when the land stabilizes again, it bears no trace of what came before. Only new rock, new soil, new beginnings. This cycle of erasure is why Mars and the Moon preserve their histories more clearly than Earth. On Mars, erosion is slow, tectonics dormant. The surface remembers for billions of years. On the Moon, where there is no atmosphere, no water, no renewal, even the footprints of astronauts remain unchanged. But Earth is restless. It does not remember. It rewrites itself endlessly, a book that never keeps its earlier chapters. Speculatively, This means civilizations could rise and fall without leaving monuments. Not because they built nothing, but because Earth has erased it all. A city might endure for centuries, even millennia, but against the scale of deep time, it is as transient as a footprint in sand before the tide. Even a civilization spanning continents might leave behind nothing more than subtle chemical signatures, faint anomalies in rock layers, indistinguishable from natural processes. This is the paradox of searching for forgotten worlds on Earth. The very forces that make life possible, the cycling of water, the shifting of continents, the renewal of soils are the same forces that erase life's traces. Memory is possible only in fragments, in fossils and sediments that survive by chance. For every bone we find, countless others are lost. For every tool unearthed, countless more have crumbled to dust. And so we must imagine Earth not as a faithful keeper of memory, but as a machine of forgetting. A machine that erases almost everything, keeping only whispers. A machine that ensures we may never know whether we are the first civilization or only the latest. If others came before us, they may be gone beyond recovery, written out of the planet's surface, recycled into magma, erased by erosion, buried beneath new seas. But perhaps this is the deeper truth, that civilizations, like species, are not meant to endure forever. They rise, they flourish, they fall, and Earth itself ensures their impermanence. And yet, in that impermanence lies the wonder. For though Earth forgets, we remember. Though stone crumbles, story endures. Though tectonics erase monuments, imagination rebuilds them. The Earth may be a reset machine, but the human mind resists its silence, forever asking, forever seeking the traces of worlds that may have come before. If Earth is a reset machine, erasing its surface again and again, then what will remain of us? What will future archaeologists, whether human descendants, evolved species, or visitors from beyond, find if they dig through the layers of our time? The first truth is sobering. Our cities, our monuments, even our tallest towers will not last. Steel rusts, concrete fractures, glass shatters. In just a few thousand years, most visible traces of our civilization would be gone, reclaimed by forests, seas, and deserts. In 10 million years, continental drift and erosion would erase almost everything. Our greatest monuments would not stand like the pyramids, but vanish almost entirely. And yet, not all would be lost. The Earth itself will keep certain signatures of our presence subtle, chemical, enduring. Plastics, for instance. Already they are everywhere, in oceans, in sediments, in the very air we breathe. Over time, they will be compressed into the geological record, forming strange hybrid stones called plastiglomerates. Millions of years from now, a geologist might split a rock and find within it colorful flecks, unnatural polymers, frozen forever in stone. Then there are isotopes. Our nuclear age has seeded the planet with radioactive signatures, some with half-lives stretching into millions of years. These isotopes, embedded in soils and sediments, will remain detectable long after our cities are dust. They are not monuments in the human sense, but they are unmistakable markers, evidence that a species once harnessed the atom, split it, and scattered its traces across the globe. Fossil fuels, too, leave their signature. By burning ancient carbon, we have altered the very chemistry of the atmosphere. Carbon isotopes now show a sharp deviation, an anomaly geologists of the far future would notice instantly. This spike in the geological record will mark our age, just as iridium marks the asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs. It will whisper, "Something unusual happened here." Even our mining and industry leave scars. We have moved metals from deep within the Earth's crust to its surface, redistributing them in ways no natural process would. We have created compounds and chemicals that do not occur in nature, embedding them in soils and sediments. These too will endure, strange fingerprints pressed into the stone of the future. But would these faint signals be enough? Imagine a scientist millions of years from now studying these anomalies. They might see a layer of plastics, a spike of isotopes, a band of altered carbon. Would they know these were the remnants of a civilization? Or would they see them as natural oddities, chemical quirks of a restless planet? If earlier civilizations existed, their traces would be similar. They too might have left chemical signatures, isotopic anomalies, subtle scars in the earth. But we might already have missed them, mistaking their traces for natural events. A sudden warming or cooling in the deep past, a spike in carbon or methane. Could these be the echoes of industries long erased? Could what we call a natural anomaly be the ghost of a forgotten civilization? This is the unsettling possibility raised by the Silurian hypothesis that we would not recognize a pre-human civilization even if it had existed. The record is too incomplete, the signals too faint, the forgetting too thorough. We assume we are the first because we see no others. But perhaps the others are there, hidden in the rocks, already passed over as coincidence, anomaly, or chance. Future archaeology, then, is not just about what remains of us, it is a mirror held up to the past. For the traces we will leave: plastics in stone, isotopes in soil, anomalies in chemistry are the very traces we should be looking for in deep time. They are the kinds of whispers another civilization would have left behind, if any existed before us. And if we cannot be certain our traces will be understood, how can we be certain theirs are not already beneath our feet? If the rocks preserve whispers in chemistry, then myths preserve whispers in story. For while Earth erases, humanity remembers. Not always in detail, not always with accuracy, but in symbols, in allegory, in tales told from parent to child across the gulf of centuries. Oral traditions are, in their way, living fossils, records that endure not in stone but in story. Across cultures, we find echoes of catastrophe, creation, and collapse. Myths of floods are among the most widespread. From Mesopotamia comes the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Utnapishtim survives a deluge sent by the gods. From the Hebrew Bible comes Noah, building his ark as waters rise. In India, the story of Manu tells of a great flood, warned by a fish. In the Americas, the Maya, the Inca, and the Hopi speak of worlds drowned and remade. In Polynesia, islands remember ancestors escaping rising seas. Are these merely metaphors for the unpredictability of nature? Or are they memories of real events, the drowning of coastlines at the end of the last ice age when sea levels rose by more than 100 meters? To those who lived through it, such events would have felt apocalyptic, and in story form, they endure even now. But floods are not the only recurring theme. Many traditions speak of fire from the sky. The Zoroastrians of Persia told of a world remade by fire. The Aztecs spoke of suns destroyed, each age ending in flames. Norse mythology tells of Ragnarok, when the heavens burn and the world is consumed. Some of these tales may reflect memory of meteors, comets, or volcanic eruptions witnessed by early humans. Others speak of wars among gods in the heavens. In Hindu epics, flying vimanas battle with weapons that resemble descriptions of radiant energy. In Greek myth, the Titans and Olympians wage war with thunderbolts. The sky itself becomes a battleground, remembered in symbols that may reflect real events, celestial impacts, auroras, or perhaps even phenomena beyond our comprehension. What is striking is not the detail of these myths, but their universality. Cultures separated by oceans tell stories that rhyme with one another. Floods, fires, wars of gods, golden ages followed by destruction. Is this coincidence or convergence? Or is it memory fragments of real catastrophes, carried forward in allegory, encoded in language, enduring where archaeology fails. Anthropologists note that oral traditions can preserve astonishing detail. Australian Aboriginal stories, passed down for tens of thousands of years, describe coastlines that were drowned at the end of the Ice Age, stories now confirmed by geological evidence. Polynesian navigators preserved star maps in song, enabling voyages across thousands of miles. Oral history is not static, but it is resilient. It carries kernels of truth wrapped in metaphor, surviving across ages. Speculatively, could some myths preserve memory not only of human catastrophes, but of pre-human ones? Could the story of a flood recall not just the melting of glaciers, but something older, a drowned world belonging to a forgotten people? Could tales of fire from the sky be echoes of impacts that ended more than species, but civilizations we no longer remember? Could sky god wars encode memories of cosmic events, reframed as battles in the heavens? We cannot know for certain. But what myths reveal is that memory is not limited to archaeology. It is not limited to stone. It can be carried in words, in symbols, in the collective imagination of cultures. And in that imagination, fragments of deep time may survive, refracted but enduring. The possibility, then, is that myths are more than stories. They are archives. Not literal, not precise, but symbolic archives of catastrophe and survival. They whisper that civilizations may rise and fall, and that even when their stones are gone, their memories endure in story. Perhaps then, to search for lost civilizations is not only to look in rocks and fossils, but also in myths. To read them not only as metaphor, but as memory encoded, refracted, but still carrying echoes of worlds long gone. If myths are memory refracted through story, then symbols are memory distilled into shape. They are the fragments of knowledge that cultures carry not only in words, but in images and patterns recurring across time and space, reappearing in forms too similar to be ignored. They are not history in the literal sense, but they are legacies, transmitting something ancient through the language of symbol. One of the most enduring symbols is the serpent. Across the world, serpents appear as guardians, destroyers, and creators. In Mesopotamian myth, Tiamat, the primordial serpent, is slain, her body becoming the cosmos. In Norse tradition, Jormungandr encircles the world, destined to rise in Ragnarok. In Hindu mythology, the cosmic serpent Ananta supports the god Vishnu as he dreams creation into being. Even in Mesoamerican culture, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, is a bringer of knowledge and civilization. Why does this image endure? Is it simply that serpents are powerful and fearful creatures, inspiring awe wherever they are found? Or is there something more? Some see in the serpent an ancient metaphor for cycles coiling and uncoiling like time itself, shedding skin as renewal, devouring its own tail as the eternal Ouroboros. Could it be that such symbols encode not only spiritual truth, but also cultural memory, an image of cycles of civilization, rising and falling endlessly, preserved in symbolic form? Another recurring symbol is the sun. Nearly every culture honors it, worships it, or encodes it in art. From Egyptian Ra to the Incan Inti, from the solar discs of Mesopotamia to the spirals carved into megalithic stones, the sun is the axis of life and time. But beyond its obvious role as giver of light, the sun often appears in myths as a destroyer as well, its fire bringing floods, droughts, or apocalypses. In some traditions, multiple suns are remembered. Chinese myth speaks of 10 suns once blazing in the sky, shot down until only one remained. The Maya described past worlds ended by suns before our own age began. Could these stories be echoes of cosmic events, solar storms, meteor impacts, or environmental catastrophes remembered as battles of the sun? Or are they archetypal, emerging from the universal human experience of living beneath the great star that sustains us? The truth may be both. Symbols need not be literal to carry memory. They can preserve the essence of experience long after its details are forgotten. And then there are the cosmic battles, gods warring in the heavens, dragons slain by heroes, titans battling Olympians, asuras clashing with devas. The sky is filled with lightning, thunder, fire, and war. On one level, these are stories of morality, allegories of conflict. But on another, they may encode memory of real events, comets streaking across the sky, auroras shimmering with unearthly light, volcanoes erupting with fire that seemed divine. To the people who witnessed them, such events would be too great to forget, too strange to explain except in the language of gods and monsters. The question is whether these recurring symbols, serpents, suns, battles in the heavens, are simply products of shared psychology, or whether they are echoes of real ancient worlds. Are they archetypes that emerge because the human mind is wired to imagine cycles, battles, and cosmic order? Or are they records, distorted but enduring, of catastrophes and civilizations erased by time, remembered only in the symbolic language of myth? Speculatively, symbols may be the oldest messages humanity possesses. They are not written in books nor inscribed in stone alone, but repeated across cultures, passed in art, ritual, and dream. They may represent humanity's attempt to preserve truths too vast for words, that worlds end, that cycles repeat, that we are not the first nor the last to walk the earth. If that is so, then symbolic knowledge is itself a legacy not of one culture or one people, but of the earth as a whole. It may be that in the serpent, the sun, and the battle in the heavens, we are seeing not only myth but memory, not only archetype but archive, a legacy of forgotten civilizations, encoded in symbols that survive where stone and story fail. And perhaps that is why these images still move us, because in them we sense something older than ourselves, something deeper, a whisper that we, too, are part of a cycle, and that even if our stones crumble and our stories are lost, our symbols may yet endure bridges across time, carrying echoes of forgotten worlds into futures we cannot yet imagine. If symbols remind us that knowledge may endure in forms we do not expect, evolution reminds us that intelligence itself is not unique. It is not the property of one lineage, nor the inevitable crown of humanity. It is an experiment that Earth has run again and again, in different bodies, in different ages, with different results. Consider the mammals. Our own branch, Homo sapiens, is but one twig on a vast and tangled tree. For millions of years, other hominins walked the earth. Neanderthals with their art and burial practices, Denisovans with their genetic legacy, Homo floresiensis with their diminutive frames, yet capable of tool-making. Each shows that intelligence is not singular, but plural. That humanity itself is only one version of a wider experiment, most of which has already been lost to time. But mammals are not alone. Birds, too, reveal surprising depths of cognition. Corvids, crows, ravens, magpies solve puzzles, use tools, and recognize themselves in mirrors. Parrots communicate with remarkable nuance, blending sounds into meaning. In evolutionary terms, their intelligence arose independently, a separate solution to the problem of survival. If intelligence can bloom in mammals and in birds, what prevents it from blooming again in ways we cannot yet imagine? And then there are the cephalopods, octopuses, squids, cuttlefish. They are as alien as life on Earth can be, soft-bodied, boneless, descended not from vertebrates but from mollusks. Yet their minds astonish us. Octopuses open jars, mimic other species, and even display what looks like play. Their intelligence evolved entirely apart from our own. Proof that cognition is not a single road but a convergence, an outcome life reaches by many paths. What this suggests is profound. Intelligence is not an anomaly. It is not a fluke. It is a tendency, a possibility that emerges wherever evolution has time and complexity enough to experiment. Earth, in its 4.5 billion years, has not had one chance at intelligence. It has had many. Some succeeded briefly, like the Neanderthals. Others shimmered in possibility, like the corvids or cephalopods. Still others may have risen far higher, only to vanish so completely that we no longer remember them. Speculatively, Earth may be less a stage for a single civilization than a cradle for repeated experiments. Each age produces its candidates. Some reach the threshold of complexity, tool use, language, society. Others fall short, undone by catastrophe, by competition, by chance. And even those who succeed may not endure. For intelligence is fragile, and civilization more fragile still. If this is true, then humanity is not the first experiment, nor will we be the last. We are one iteration in a sequence stretching back into prehistory and forward into futures we cannot see. A sequence in which civilizations rise, burn briefly like stars, and fade, leaving only whispers in stone, in myth, in symbol. And so the question shifts. It is not whether Earth has produced civilizations before, but how many? How many cycles have unfolded beneath skies now forgotten? How many times has intelligence arisen, reached, and fallen silent? How many worlds have been written upon this earth, erased by time, and written again? The scale of deep time tells us the answer could be countless, and the examples of birds, mammals, cephalopods tell us it is not impossible. Intelligence is not rare. What is rare is survival. If intelligence is not rare, then why do we not see its monuments stretching back into deep time? Why do we not find their ruins alongside the bones of dinosaurs, their artifacts embedded in ancient stone? Perhaps the answer lies not in the scarcity of intelligence, but in the fragility of civilization. Civilizations, once born, face challenges that are as old as Earth itself. Resources are finite, climates shift, disasters strike. Some civilizations adapt, others collapse. And perhaps, across the long arc of Earth's history, there exists what scientists call a great filter, a barrier that most intelligent species cannot pass, a stage at which civilizations destroy themselves or are undone by forces greater than they can control. We see echoes of this even in our brief human story. Societies rise, flourish, and fall. The Maya, the Minoans, the Akkadians, each was undone by drought, invasion, or the slow grinding weight of resource depletion. Their collapse was local, temporary, but on a global scale, the same pressures apply, magnified, and when the whole Earth is the stage, collapse may mean erasure so complete that even memory cannot endure. Today, humanity stands at such a threshold. Our technologies have given us power beyond any previous age, but with that power come risks. Climate change alters the balance of the atmosphere. Oceans warm and acidify. Forests vanish. Species disappear. We extract resources at unsustainable rates, depleting the very foundations of our prosperity. In our pursuit of growth, we risk undermining the stability that civilization requires. And beyond our own actions, the cosmos remains indifferent. Asteroids still cross our orbit. Supervolcanoes still slumber beneath our feet. A single eruption, a single impact, could unravel all we have built, just as such events may have undone other civilizations before us. Speculatively, this may explain the silence of the past. If intelligence has arisen before, perhaps it always falters at this filter. Civilizations may reach for permanence, but are undone by their own excesses, by their inability to adapt, or by catastrophes beyond their control. Their traces vanish into Earth's recycling, leaving behind only anomalies, myths, and questions. Are we different, or are we walking the same path, dreaming of permanence while standing at the edge of collapse? It is possible that we, too, are destined to become whispers in stone and myth, our cities reduced to dust, our memory preserved only in faint chemical scars for future species to puzzle over. The Great Filter, then, is not only a scientific hypothesis, it is a mirror. It reflects our fragility, our impermanence, our tendency to believe in eternity while standing in the shadow of time. It suggests that perhaps no civilization lasts forever, not because intelligence is rare, but because survival is harder than imagination. And if that is true, then we are not unique. We are only the latest, and unless we learn to pass the filter, we may also be forgotten, one more spark in the darkness, one more chapter erased by the vast silence of Earth. If civilizations rise and fall, leaving only whispers, then where might we search for those faintest traces? Not in cities or monuments, those crumble too quickly, but in the deeper record of the Earth itself, in the chemistry of air, soil, and stone. For even when structures vanish, the planet remembers in subtler ways. Already, our own presence is etched into this record. The sharp rise in carbon dioxide over the last 2 centuries, caused by the burning of fossil fuels, is a signal no geologist could mistake. Future scientists, millions of years from now, would see it as a sudden spike in the carbon isotopes locked within stone layers. A signal unlike anything in the long sweep of natural variation. But what if we are not the first? Could other spikes, anomalies, or strange deviations in the geological record be the fingerprints of civilizations long gone? Scientists have found mysterious events in Earth's past. During the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, around 56 million years ago, global temperatures rose dramatically, driven by a sudden surge of carbon in the atmosphere. The cause remains debated: volcanic activity, methane release, or something else. Could it be natural? Almost certainly. But could it also be the faint echo of industrial activity, burning, mining, or processes we no longer recognize? The possibility lingers, even if faint. Other anomalies exist: layers of unusual isotopes, spikes in heavy metals, chemical residues embedded in sediments. Most are explained through natural processes: volcanoes, asteroid impacts, the slow turning of ocean currents. Yet explanations are not certainty. If a pre-human civilization had risen millions of years ago, its traces might look much the same. A sudden shift in carbon, an unusual layer of metals, an unexplained chemical horizon. Even plastics or their equivalents might fossilize in disguise. Over millions of years, polymers break down, transform, merge with minerals. A geologist might mistake them for strange organic deposits or unusual stones. What we would see as unmistakable evidence could, in deep time, be hidden within the very fabric of rock. Speculatively, this means we may already have seen the evidence of earlier civilizations without recognizing it. We catalogue anomalies, assign them natural causes, and move on. But what if some of those anomalies are not natural? What if they are the remnants of industries erased by time, civilizations lost to Earth's recycling? The challenge is not that the record is silent, but that it is ambiguous. The Earth does not label its layers with certainty. It does not distinguish between the carbon spike of a volcano and the carbon spike of a factory. It simply records the change, leaving interpretation to those who come later. And so the possibility remains that in climate and soil, in isotopes and residues, we are already touching the fingerprints of forgotten worlds. That the story of civilization is not singular, but cyclical. That Earth has been shaped not only by nature, but by intelligence. Intelligence that rose, altered the planet, and fell, leaving behind no more than chemical scars. The soil remembers, even when the stones do not. The atmosphere records, even when the monuments crumble. And in those records, perhaps, lie the whispers of civilizations older than memory, older than myth, civilizations waiting for us to recognize them. If the soil remembers, then the task before us is not only to imagine, but to search, to learn how to read Earth's memory more carefully, more humbly, and with the awareness that what we seek may already be before us, hidden in plain sight. Scientists already practice this search in many ways. Ice cores drilled from Greenland and Antarctica preserve atmospheric records stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. In their frozen layers are trapped bubbles of ancient air, each one a tiny time capsule. By studying them, we learn how carbon dioxide and methane levels have shifted, how climates have warmed and cooled, how the Earth has breathed across ages. Sediments, too, are archives. Mud layered at the bottoms of lakes and oceans accumulates year by year, capturing traces of pollen, ash, minerals, and isotopes. To a trained eye, these layers are more than mud. They are history itself, compressed into fine bands of color and composition. They tell of droughts, floods, fires, eruptions, even of human industry in the most recent layers. Geologists and chemists also search for isotopic anomalies, unusual ratios of carbon, nitrogen, or oxygen that cannot be explained by ordinary processes. Some anomalies, such as the iridium-rich layer marking the Chicxulub impact, are unmistakable fingerprints of catastrophe. Others remain more ambiguous: sudden spikes in carbon, unexplained shifts in oxygen isotopes, layers rich in heavy metals without clear origin. Each anomaly is a question. Most have natural answers: volcanoes, asteroids, shifting oceans. But some defy easy explanation. Could one of them be the footprint of an earlier industrial age, erased yet still whispering through chemistry? If so, would we recognize it for what it is, or dismiss it as coincidence? The challenge lies in the invisibility of civilization in deep time. Cities do not fossilize, machines decay, knowledge burns. Only the most indirect traces remain: chemical scars, isotopic echoes, subtle disruptions in the planet's cycles. To detect them requires not only science, but imagination, the willingness to consider that we may not be the first. Already, a few scientists have asked this question openly. The so-called Silurian hypothesis, posed by researchers at NASA, asks, how would we know if an industrial civilization had existed millions of years ago? Their conclusion is unsettling. We might not. We might overlook it entirely, mistaking its traces for natural events, its signals for ordinary fluctuations. The Earth forgets too well, and we interpret too narrowly. Speculatively, this means the signs of past civilizations could already be catalogued in ice cores, in sediments, in isotope tables without anyone recognizing them. A spike attributed to methane release might be something else. A sudden warming event might not be entirely natural. An unexplained chemical horizon might in fact be the residue of intelligence. The search for the invisible, then, is not only about data, it is about perception, about expanding the frame of what we are willing to see. For the evidence of forgotten civilizations, if it exists, may not look like monuments or artifacts. It may look like a line in a graph, a spike in a table, a whisper in stone that we have already measured and misunderstood. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson, that to find what came before us, we must learn to look differently, not for the obvious, but for the subtle. Not for what resembles us, but for what endures. For civilizations, like species, may rise and fall, leaving behind only traces so faint that they are nearly invisible, traces waiting for us to notice. If others walked this earth before us, then our place in the story is not as originators, but as inheritors. We are not the first flame of intelligence, but one spark in a long succession, a rhythm of rise and fall that stretches back beyond memory. Such a realization demands humility, for we often imagine ourselves as the pinnacle, the unique outcome of evolution, the sole authors of civilization. But if others built before us, even if erased, then we are not unique. We are one chapter in a longer book, written by the earth itself, in which intelligence appears, grows, and fades. This does not diminish us. If anything, it deepens the wonder. It means we belong not to an isolated triumph, but to a cosmic lineage of striving, of dreaming, of reaching toward permanence. Perhaps this is why myths across cultures speak of teachers, of gods, of figures who arrive bearing knowledge. In Sumer, the Abkalu sages from before the flood teach humanity writing and law. In Egypt, Thoth brings the arts of calculation and wisdom. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl is remembered as the bringer of agriculture and civilization. In Polynesia, the culture hero Maui steals fire for humankind. Are these simply the metaphors of culture, stories of divine gifts? Or could they be refracted memories of survivors, remnants of older civilizations, reduced to myth, remembered not as humans but as gods? If a civilization rose before us and fell, leaving only fragments of knowledge, those fragments might be received by our ancestors as gifts from beings beyond comprehension. Teachers remembered as deities, survivors remembered as immortals. Such a view reshapes our philosophy. Humanity is not the author of civilization, but a participant in its cycles. We do not stand alone at the summit of history, but within its flow, inheritors of what came before, custodians of what may come after. To know this is to feel both small and vast, small in the span of time, vast in the continuity of story. Speculatively, if others walked before us, then memory itself becomes their gift. Not only myths of gods and teachers, but symbols, alignments, echoes embedded in stone and soil. Perhaps they intended to be remembered, even if faintly. Perhaps they hoped that when we rose, we would find their traces and know we were not alone. And perhaps this is the truest role of humanity, not to imagine we are the first or the last, but to recognize we are part of a larger rhythm. A rhythm of intelligence written into earth itself, expressed in forms that rise, vanish, and rise again. If others walked before us, then our story is not singular but shared, and in that sharing perhaps lies our meaning. If others walked before us, then it follows that others may walk after. Humanity is not eternal. We are bound by the same forces that ended the reign of dinosaurs, that erased empires, that ground civilizations into dust. Someday, whether by catastrophe or slow decline, we too will vanish, but the earth will remain, and life will continue its great experiment. The question is, who or what might inherit the mantle of intelligence after us? Some look to the oceans, where dolphins and whales already demonstrate extraordinary cognition. Dolphins recognize themselves in mirrors, use tools, communicate with a complex language of clicks and whistles. Their societies are intricate, their playfulness profound. If humanity were gone, might dolphins, given millions of years, rise further, developing technologies not of fire and stone, but of sound and water? Their world is fluid, their tools limited by the sea, but perhaps intelligence need not look like ours. Perhaps an aquatic civilization could flourish in ways we cannot yet imagine. Others suggest the corvids, crows, ravens, magpies. Already, they rival primates in problem-solving. They craft tools, remember human faces, even plan for the future. A crow with time and chance might one day become more than a clever bird. Given millennia, perhaps its descendants could create societies as intricate as our own, guided not by hands of flesh but by beaks and wings. Their monuments woven from living trees, their technologies grown rather than forged. And then there are the cephalopods. Octopuses astound us with their intelligence, solving puzzles, opening jars, escaping aquariums with cunning that seems almost human in its creativity. Their bodies are fragile, their lifespans short, but evolution could change that. In some distant epoch, might octopuses live longer, grow larger, and create cultures beneath the waves. Their civilization might leave no monuments of stone, but instead patterns in coral, structures of shell, languages of light and color flickering across their skin. Speculatively, Earth may not be the stage for one civilization, but for many waves of intelligence, each wave rising, building, vanishing, each different in form, feathered, scaled, soft-bodied, furred, but each echoing the same impulse: to shape, to remember, to endure. Civilization, in this view, is not an anomaly, but a recurring feature of life, as inevitable as the tide, as fragile as the flame. If humanity falls, the experiment will continue. The earth will not mourn us. It will turn, as it always has, offering new chances, new forms, new intelligences. Perhaps in millions of years, the next civilization will look upon our faint traces, plastics in stone, isotopes in soil, and wonder, as we wonder now, if they are the first. Perhaps they too will tell myths of gods and teachers, not knowing that the gods were us. And in that cycle, perhaps, lies Earth's truest story: not a single civilization, but many; not permanence, but renewal. Intelligence as a river, flowing through different vessels, never still, always changing, always returning in new forms. Civilizations rise. They flourish, they dream, they reach for permanence. And then, in time, they fall. What they leave behind is rarely what they intended. A few stones, a few symbols, a few stories, traces scattered like seeds in the soil of the future. To live long enough is to be forgotten, and perhaps this forgetting is not a failure, but the very rhythm of Earth itself. The planet is a palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten across billions of years. Each new age overwrites the last. Seas rise and erase the coastlines of ancient worlds. Mountains are lifted and then ground down to dust. Forests burn, deserts bloom, glaciers carve and recede. On this canvas, civilizations are but brief inscriptions, faint lines written in erasable ink. When we look back, we find not complete stories, but fragments. A bone here, a shard of pottery there, a ruin half buried in sand. Even the civilizations we know, Rome, the Maya, the Indus Valley, are remembered incompletely, their voices muffled by time. How much more, then, has been lost? How many entire chapters of Earth's story have been erased, overwritten by new worlds until only silence remains? Speculatively, perhaps intelligence always forgets itself. Perhaps this is its fate. Each civilization imagines permanence, builds monuments, writes records. Yet over deep time, all are erased. What endures are only the faintest echoes, the whispers we misinterpret as myth, the symbols we inherit without remembering their origin. Even now, our own story may already be slipping into the cycle of forgetting, our permanence more fragile than we wish to believe. This cycle may be universal. Intelligence is not immune to entropy, to catastrophe, to the slow grinding of time. Each wave rises, leaves its faint traces, and is forgotten until another rises, unaware of those who came before, imagining itself the first. Humanity may be doing just that, mistaking silence for uniqueness, forgetting that forgetting itself may be the law of civilizations. And yet, in this cycle, there is a strange beauty. To forget is not to erase entirely. It is to transform, to distill memory into fragments that inspire wonder. Myths of floods, symbols of serpents, anomalies in stone, all may be remnants of worlds before. And though their full stories are lost, they still speak, if only in whispers. Perhaps intelligence does not need permanence. Perhaps its role is to rise, to dream, to inscribe its vision briefly on the palimpsest of Earth, knowing it will be forgotten, yet leaving behind seeds for the next to find. Perhaps the cycle of memory and forgetting is not a tragedy, but the deepest rhythm of all, a rhythm that binds us not only to our past, but to the future civilizations yet to come. If forgetting is the rhythm of Earth, then what will remain of us when our turn has passed? What traces will endure, not for centuries or millennia, but for millions of years, long enough for some future civilization, human or otherwise, to discover? The monuments we prize will not survive. Our cities will crumble, steel rusts, glass shatters, concrete decays. Forests will reclaim our streets, deserts will swallow our towers, seas will erode our coastlines. In 10,000 years, only ruins will remain. In 1,000,000, even ruins will be gone, yet not all will vanish. Some things endure longer than stone. Plastics are one such legacy. Already, they are everywhere, lacing oceans, embedded in beaches, drifting through the air. Over time, they will fuse with sand and rock, creating plastiglomerates, stones born of human industry. These strange hybrids will persist for millions of years, their unnatural polymers a signal no geologist could mistake for natural. They will be our fossils, our pottery shards, our legacy pressed into stone. Then there are isotopes. Our nuclear age has seeded the planet with signatures that will endure for tens of millions of years. Strontium, plutonium, uranium, isotopes, traces of our brief flirtation with the atom, will remain detectable in sediments long after our species is forgotten. They are, in a sense, our fingerprints, evidence that we not only lived, but harnessed forces at the heart of matter itself. Our industry, too, has shifted the balance of the atmosphere. By burning ancient carbon, we have left a chemical scar in the air itself. Future geologists will see it as a sharp spike in carbon isotopes, a sudden anomaly in Earth's breathing. It will mark our age as surely as the iridium layer marks the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs. It will whisper, "Something unusual happened here." Even the shape of the land bears our mark. Rivers dammed, forests felled, mountains quarried, coastlines remade. These changes will not last forever, but some will endure. Future species might walk upon a landscape subtly altered by our hands, never knowing it was once a city, a farm, a mine. Speculatively, these may be the only memories we leave. Not our art, not our stories, not our names, but plastics in stone, isotopes in soil, a thin layer of altered chemistry in the record of the Earth. Faint, but undeniable. And perhaps that is enough. For if future civilizations rise, they may one day stumble upon these traces. They may find our chemical scars and wonder, as we wonder now, were we the first, or only the latest? They may tell myths of us, as we tell myths of Atlantis, stories of an age before their own, when another species walked the earth and dreamed of permanence. In that sense, our legacy is not only what we build, but what we leave behind for others to rediscover. Not monuments of stone, but monuments of chemistry. Not pyramids, but plastics. Not names, but isotopes. Our memory fossilized not in story, but in soil. And when they find it, perhaps they will see in us what we now seek in those who came before. Not certainty, but possibility. The possibility that civilization is not singular, but cyclical. That we are not unique, but part of a rhythm larger than ourselves. That our legacy is not permanence, but participation in the endless experiment of life. To see ourselves as possibility is to see Earth differently, not as the stage for a single story, but as the home of many lost ages. Each age is like a page in a book, turned and forgotten, yet leaving behind faint impressions of ink. Civilizations rise like sparks in the night, flare brightly, and then fade into darkness. Their ashes drift into soil and sea. Their memory dissolves into myth, but their presence lingers subtle, spectral, waiting to be imagined anew. Perhaps Earth has always been such a canvas, a place where intelligence blossoms like a flower, fragile and fleeting, yet inevitable in its return. Dinosaurs may have dreamed. Cephalopods may yet dream again. Hominins before us shaped tools and sang songs to the fire, their voices lost but their echoes faintly heard in the caves they once painted. Each spark is brief, but the night is long, and the stars endure. Civilizations, in this light, are not failures when they fade. They are chapters in an eternal rhythm: birth, growth, silence, renewal. What is forgotten is not erased. It is transformed into possibility, into story, into inspiration for those who come after. When we speak of Atlantis, of Mu, of Hyperborea, we are not speaking only of what was, but of what could be. They are myths, yes, but also mirrors, reflecting back our own longing to endure, to be remembered, to leave more than dust behind. Speculatively, perhaps this is the true poetry of forgotten worlds, that their silence feeds our imagination, that their absence gives us space to wonder, to dream of civilizations older, wiser, stranger than our own. And in dreaming of them, we keep them alive not as facts, but as possibilities, as reminders that the universe is deeper than we know, and time vaster than we can measure. And so, one day, humanity too may be myth, our cities drowned, our monuments erased, our names lost to the long forgetting. But in some distant future, perhaps another species will rise and find our faint traces, plastics in stone, isotopes in soil, stories whispered across eons. They will wonder at us as we wonder at those who may have walked before. They will tell myths of a golden age, of ancestors who reached for the stars and vanished. To imagine this is not to despair, it is to see our place in a greater rhythm. We are a spark in the night, brief but beautiful, part of a constellation of forgotten worlds stretching back into deep time and forward into futures unimagined. And even if we fade, our story will not end. It will become myth. It will become memory. It will become one more flame in the poetry of Earth. The Earth is vast. 4.5 billion years old, it has carried more stories than we can count, more lives than we can imagine. Against such a scale, our own civilization is young, fragile, and fleeting. We build monuments, we leave records. We dream of permanence, but forgetting may be the planet's deepest rhythm. It erases even the greatest of ages, grinding them down into silence, leaving only whispers in stone, in soil, in myth. And so we return to the question that haunts us. Are we truly the first, or only the latest in a cycle that has played out countless times before? Civilizations may rise, blaze brightly for a while, and then vanish until their memory is reduced to fragments, their legacy to anomalies, their stories to myth. Perhaps that is our fate as well. An Earth once again empty of us, its forests and oceans reclaiming the world. Our cities collapsed, our names forgotten, our monuments erased, the surface scrubbed clean, waiting in silence. Until, in some far future, another intelligence awakens. It will look upon the world with fresh wonder. It will search the soil and the stars for meaning, and it will ask, as we ask now, were we the first or only the latest?